Sis, take a seat and welcome to the Healing Circle. This is a space where you can let go of the mask, let go of the insecurities, let go of the pain, let go of the hurt, let go of the trauma that you have been carrying, and enter into a safe space where you can be naked, where you can be authentically yourself. This space is reserved for you to be able to shed the coats that you have been carrying. You know those coats? The insecurities, the lack of confidence, the trauma, the pain, the abuse, the heartache, those coats that you have been carrying that God never intended for you to carry by yourself. Well, sis, this space is here so you can begin to work on your healing, and you do not have to do it alone. So sis, take a seat and let's begin to journey out this healing together. Tell me in the comments, what is one thing that you are wanting to release today? Sis, I don't know what you've been carrying, but let's talk about that anger that you've been feeling. Have you noticed how short-tempered you have been lately, sis? It's not because you're a bad person. It's because you are wearing trauma like armor. Can I be honest with you for a second? Sis, you have been carrying disappointment. That disappointment from that heartbreak that you went through that you haven't completely processed. That disappointment for that job that you didn't get that you prayed for. That disappointment for that family member's healing and you ended up losing them anyways. Sis, you have been carrying disappointment. And because you have been carrying that unprocessed disappointment, now it has transferred over to anger and resentment and short-temperedness. Not even in your relationship with self. Because sis, if we're being honest, maybe you have been a little bit hard on yourself. Maybe you have been a little bit critical of yourself. But no, I'm not talking about that short-temperedness. I'm talking about the short-temperedness that you have maybe been feeling towards others. That short-temperedness that when your child asks you for something, you are immediately triggered. That short-temperedness when you're on the phone with that friend and they say something out of line. That short-temperedness. That short-temperedness that when you're on the road, you accidentally hit a wrong turn and now it has ruined the rest of your day. Sis, that is disappointment that you have been carrying. And now you have become angry. You have become resentful. You have not been the life of the party, the person that people want to be around anymore. That disappointment, sis, has now turned into trauma. And that trauma is now what you are wearing as a source of your armor. And because of that, sis, now you are feeling the residue of the anger and the short-temperedness that you have been carrying. Those emotions, they've been built over years of pain, memories that you've tucked away, and wounds that you've tried to bury. No judgment, sis. This is a safe space because even I have been there. I've been angry at myself for things that have happened, and I've also been angry at others for the things that they have done against me. I've carried that anger and I began to compartmentalize it. But do you know what happens when we begin to compartmentalize and we begin to sweep things under the rug? When we begin to sweep anger, trauma, hurt, pain, disappointment, all of those things that you begin to sweep under the rug, you begin to start tripping over your own mess. And that was me. In my life, I tucked away so much disappointment and hurt. All of the friendships that walked away from me without even a sense of closure. All of the men who hurt me without truly being able to tell me why. So many things that I experienced in my life, I tucked away. And if I'm being honest, sis, even my relationship with my dad, I tucked away. My dad was a strong-willed man, but he also was an unemotionally available man. And because he wasn't able to give me the things that I was needing as a little girl, the safety, the love, the nurturing, the things that I was seeking as a young girl, I then began to carry it into my adulthood life, looking for validation, acceptance in spaces that I should have received in childhood, that I should have been able to turn over and receive from God. But yet, I began to travel in trauma as I went from one relationship to the next, to the next, to the next, knowing that I was entering into familiar patterns that weren't healthy. And because of that, it left me feeling disappointed time and time again. Sis, this may be your story, but Can I tell you something that I've recognized? That disappointment that I felt from my father, that I began to traffic into adulthood, that disappointment buried me in so much pain, so much resentment. And because of that, I became angry at the world. I didn't understand why I was so short-tempered. I didn't understand why the smallest thing that my daughter asked, I was just so quick to just become triggered. But I had to recognize in my own personal healing journey that all that was built up anger and resentment from past pain that I had attempted to bury. But can we be honest, sis? Just because you bury something and just because it is hidden underneath the surface does not mean that it is not present, does not mean that it is not there, does not mean that it ceased to exist. Sis, you buried that disappointment. You buried that trauma, that experience, that pain. You hid it, but it is still present. But can I tell you something that I've learned? That anger, that disappointment, that unprocessed pain and trauma, sis, that wasn't helping me heal. It was actually keeping me stuck in the pain. And that's what happens when we bury something and we hide something underneath the surface. You may not be able to see it, but that doesn't mean that it's not still present. So sis, I want to give you some faith coaching tips on how to heal that unprocessed anger. Number one, acknowledge the pain. God cannot heal something that you are not ready to reveal. Sis, before we begin to take any steps in this healing journey, we first have to begin to acknowledge and be honest with ourselves about the pain and the disappointment that we've been carrying. Acknowledge what hurt you. Let yourself feel it. And when I say feel it, sis, I mean feel it completely. I want you to begin to recognize what it is that your body has been trying to tell you all along. You know, that tension that you feel when you begin to get triggered, or that stomach ache that you begin to feel in your gut when you enter into a familiar trauma environment. When I was finally able to acknowledge the pain from my childhood, when I was finally able to acknowledge the abandonment, the lack of nurturing that I was yearning for that I didn't receive, when I was finally able to acknowledge that pain, I was able to invite God into the brokenness of my heart. I learned that God isn't afraid of my emotions. God isn't afraid of carrying the weight and the trauma that I have been packing. In fact, He has been waiting patiently for me to be able to surrender it to Him. Let me encourage you, sis, and validate you in this moment. God wants to carry the broken parts of your heart. God wants to meet you in the broken places of your heart. So don't do what you did when you hid that trauma, when you hid that experience, when you hid that pain. Instead, it's time to uproot so we can begin to dispose of it the right way. Forgive yourself. I know that sounds so scary, but sis, I need you to relinquish the shame that you have been carrying. After you've acknowledged the pain, sis, now I need you to forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for what you didn't know, for what you couldn't control, and the ways you tried to protect yourself. Everyone always talks about being able to forgive others. But what about when you have to begin to forgive yourself? What about when you have to begin to forgive yourself for stepping into that relationship you knew wasn't any good for you? What about having to forgive yourself for stepping into that environment that you knew you weren't meant to go to, but because you did, now something traumatic happened to you in that space? What about forgiving yourself for the short-temperedness that you have projected onto your children? What about forgiving yourself in the ways that you have neglected yourself, your body, your temple, your emotional health? Sis, I know you may know how to be able to forgive others, but now we need to talk about how to forgive yourself. Can we have another girl talk moment? Sis, you're human. You aren't perfect. Those mistakes in the past, the shame, the guilt, the embarrassment that you have been carrying, sis, it's time for you to begin to release that. Because you couldn't have known what would have happened when you decided to open up your heart, when you decided to step into those places, when you decided to be able to give yourself to those people. Sis, you didn't know. So it is time for you to forgive yourself. In fact, sis, that says a whole lot about your heart. Being open and forgiving to allow other people in so that way you can receive the love that you have been yearning for. Sis, you deserved in those spaces to feel love, and I am so sorry that when you entered into that space, those people, those places, they didn't necessarily guard it. They didn't necessarily protect your heart. And instead, they betrayed you, they hurt you, and the pain of that has been heavy and it's been shameful. And because you were so hard on yourself, sis, because you are so critical of yourself, now you have begun to blame you, because now you think that you should have known better. You think that your intuition should have been followed. You think that you should have been able to tell what would have happened if you entered into that space. But sis, let's be honest. You couldn't have known. And sometimes God allows us to go through things so we can get the blessing from the lesson. That experience that you went through, God may have not caused that, but God will use that, sis. And if you begin to change your perspective, then you'll begin to see that what you went through is going to come out on the other side of a blessing. And from that experience, you will begin to see the lesson in all of it. So forgive yourself and recognize that God's grace is bigger than your mistakes. Here's a journal prompt for you. Think of one mistake that you have been carrying. And I mean that first thing that comes into your mind. And I want you to write it down. And I want you to begin to journey through that pain. I know it's going to be difficult, sis, because you're going to have to dig the very thing that you have been hiding. But sis, I want you to recognize that once you begin to dig it up, once you begin to acknowledge that pain, and once you begin to forgive yourself for it, then you are going to have space in your heart to allow God to begin to work through the broken parts of your heart. Hold on to love. Those experiences, those memories that you buried, not all of them are bad, sis. If you dig deep enough, you'll see that in some moments there were laughter, there were joy, love, and lessons to hold on to. True story. I spent so much time being resentful towards my dad that I completely forgot about the good moments and the good memories that we shared together. It took me having a moment of pause to travel back into my memory bank. But once I began to open up that box of memories, I was able to see that there were so many beautiful experiences that were hidden amongst the resentment, the pain, and the trauma that I had been feeling. And from there, forgiveness became a little bit more easy, because I was no longer persecuting him and holding against him the things that he had done wrong. But now I was able to have a newfound respect and love for him, for the good memories, the good moments that we shared together. Let the good rise to the surface, sis, and let go of the pain. Trust me, you will begin to feel 100 times lighter. Lastly, I want you to be able to forgive them. Hear me. Forgiveness isn't about excusing what they did. It's about releasing the grip that pain has on you. Forgiveness releases the prisoner, sis. And I don't mean the other person. I mean you. I know this is a tough one. This is a heavy one. So in this moment, I want you to begin to pray. Pray for the strength to let go and trust that God will handle the rest. Now, sis, I want to be honest, because I don't want to lead you astray. Sometimes forgiveness isn't just a one-time thing. Forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. Something that I want you to be able to do in this season. If you can think of that one person that God is calling you to forgive in this moment, I want you to go ahead and write a letter to them. This helped me in my own personal healing journey. Write a letter. You don't have to send it. This is for you. This is for your release. This is going to allow you to dig up what has been buried. Go ahead and write that letter. Express exactly how you felt in that moment that they hurt you, in that moment that that disappointment occurred. Right? Be open, be vulnerable. Allow it to be a safe space for you to be able to express how you feel, open and honestly. And then go ahead and burn it. Go ahead and mail it. Go ahead and tuck it away, whatever you need to do for release. But just take that first step, sis. And sis, don't travel in time heals all things, because that's not necessarily true. Time doesn't heal all things. Time only prolongs trauma suffering. Sis, the anger that you are carrying is not your identity. It's a sign that you are still healing, and that is okay. I want you to be patient with yourself in this season. I know you may begin to feel that anger rising up the next time you become triggered, but this is something that I want you to remember. Healing is a journey, and every step forward matters. Sis, as long as you're moving forward, you are headed in the right direction. Sis, hear me. Once you make peace with the past, you heal your present. Here are some healing scriptures for her that I want you to carry in this season as you are traveling through short-temperedness. Matthew 11:18 reads, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Sis, it's time to dig up the burdens that you have been carrying and finally allow God to give you rest from them. Colossians 3:13 reads, "Forgive as the Lord forgave you." So sis, why are you still punishing yourself for what God has already forgiven you from? Let's unpack. Sis, what is one thing that you are ready to release today? Let us know in the comments. Let's start making room for healing and peace together. You are not alone.